Cardiovascular diseases are the leading cause of death worldwide, and high blood pressure is a major risk factor. For the estimated 1 in 3 people who will develop high blood pressure, a high sodium diet may be to blame. So today we're going to be talking about salt on 15 Minutes with Longevity. I'm Giselle Wertheim-Ains, and Sidi Guli is our resident doctor. Sidi, I love salt.
I know.
Oh, I know it's bad, but I love salt.
It's an important subject, but realistically, simply cutting out or even reducing your sodium intake can make a big difference to your health.
So today we have Jacolien Richards from the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa as our guest. She's going to shed some light on what regulations are in place to limit salt in certain foods and protect consumers. Welcome, Jacolien, to the studio with us. But first I'm going to hear from the doctor about why too much salt is bad for me and, of course, for you. Sidi.
The whole perspective on salt is really the amount, rather than the fact that salt exists. It is a natural substance of which sodium, which is what we call an electrolyte, is an important part of your body. The problem is, the reality is that a lot of us are taking too much of it. We're not taking the right amount because we find it naturally in foods. We don't need to be taking the extra stuff that we do. And the reason why high sodium diet is bad for you is the fact that it really increases the workload on the heart vessels, on the heart itself, on the kidneys, and increases your chance of getting a disease that we all know and hate to mention, but is an important one, such as high blood pressure.
I think what we don't realize is how much salt is actually added to food, unbeknown, I think, to the average consumer out there. So maybe we can just talk a little bit about where is the salt being added and who has oversight of that? I mean, are there regulations that define this industry and what can be added and what can't be in terms of the quantities?
Look, salt is added to foods, pre-prepared foods or even packaged foods that we buy for many reasons. It could be taste, it could be preservatives, it could be to enhance a certain function that another ingredient had to perform, like make glutens work properly, etc. But it is being regulated by the government. They do realize, and they also compare to the strategies of the World Health Organization, they do realize that we do taking in too much salt.
So are there guidelines specifically around how much salt can be added? I mean, I'm trying to understand. I mean, for example, white bread. I understand that in an average loaf of white bread, you have between 17 and 25 teaspoons of salt. I mean, I didn't believe that when I read about that stat. And so that's extraordinary. Really.
There are certainly guidelines, and it's been published. It's in Regulation 214, it's known as. There are certain deadlines for certain foodstuffs to have reduced their salt to a certain amount. The recommended amount for any consumer to take in a day is 5 grams.
That's it.
5 grams. So let's work that out. That's 1 teaspoon.
1 teaspoon.
So we have got like church and state going here because we have got these huge quantums. And we're speaking about it when it is to add taste and when it is a preservative. Now, in a case like that, is there an excuse for adding so much salt because you're preserving the loaf of the bread, or is that simply just a taste issue?
I think it could be a combination of both. It depends on, I mean, there's such a wide variety of products that you can talk about. It depends on which product you are referring to. But I think the important thing is that we are recognizing that there's something that needs to be done. Deadlines have been put forward for salt to be reduced. There's a flip side to it, though, because as we reduce the salt in the foods and it affects the shelf life of certain products, it has a ripple effect on additional costs that will come into the industry. So you'll have to perhaps look at what can you add instead of salt that might be more expensive. So it's trying to strike that good balance between let's take in good food but also not make the product so expensive that no one can afford it.
I guess you've got to look at the health outcome, because again, if most people are not conscious, and we know that, when we look at how many people actually study a food label, and even if you study it, they don't make it simple. Like, grams, for example, I think are meaningless to most people. But if you say to someone, there are 10 teaspoons of sugar in that bottled cola drink or whatever it is, you can get that. But if you start talking about grams, well, it doesn't sound that much actually in my head. No one sits there and equates and does the the maths on it.
Yes,
and it's the same
agree.
with salt, and I don't, I understand the cost, ratio issues and that, but surely the cost of health is really what we should be looking at, the bigger picture, and how we simplify, information to consumers so they can make the right decisions. And sure, if you want to eat 17 teaspoons of salt in some white bread, then at least that you shouldn't eat salt in anything else.
And what the consequences will be.
Yeah.
No, I think a huge education drive is needed, not just from the government, but from producers as well, and from industry bodies, and overall, to understand the consequences. At the end, the consumers should have the right to decide what they want, but at least display it in such a way that it's easy for them to make an informed decision.
Then perhaps a good starting point here of how to educate the individual consumer is, you know, something that I actually read in a Heart and Stroke Foundation in America, and unfortunately not the South African publication, where they give context of how the citizenry is actually consuming excess salt. They say 65% we're taking it from junk food and convenience stores, 25% is actually coming from the spices and the sauces that we use, and 10% is actually from the table salt. In terms of the South African consumer understanding, what are the danger areas where those kind of foodstuffs are really going to have excess salt than they need? I mean, is there a top 10, top 5? Is there a directory from a consumer point of view that educates people on how much salt actually exists in these foods that we consume?
Look, at the back of every packet, they should declare the salt or the sodium. So it should be declared, and if you are watching how much salt you're taking in, 5 grams is a good measure to use, and then just add on what you're using. The problem is a lot of the products with the display labels at the back will say how much the whole content has in. So let's take a pack of gravy. It could be that it has 5 grams of salt once the whole pack has been cooked, and none of us are really going to have a whole bowl of gravy. Other instances they would say per serving. So there's lots of work to be done in terms of how do we communicate to the consumer, because it is very confusing still at the moment.
I'm very worried about the junk food, personally, because that is where there's just huge growth. Everyone's stopping in at all these convenient fast food outlets. And the amount of sugar and salt that's added in there is just completely invisible to most people. How does the Consumer Goods Council deal with that? Because I've never seen, when I don't go, I mean,
it's not declared.
I will be honest, I'm not a great junk food eater, but when I have been into those places, I've never seen it anywhere. But they have to declare how much salt or sugar is added to their burgers, and even I understand their salad dressings, and in the salads that they serve, there's actually sugar and salt added. That is not, that we're not aware of.
So the role of the Consumer Goods Council, we're not a statutory body, and we're not part of government. We are an industry organisation that represent the views of our members, which is the large retailers and manufacturers out there. And we would often, our role is to educate them on legislation, but we would often also assist government when legislation is being drawn up. Because we've got a huge pool of knowledge within our membership base that can assist in making sure that the laws that are being passed make sense and it'll work at the end. But to get back to the fast food point, you can ask, it's part of regulation 146. When you go in there, you can ask
how much sugar, and they've got it, and if they don't answer,
and they have to.
And that's the interesting part.
Oh, we should test that. I think we should go and test that.
I'm going to do that after the show.
You can ask them. They should be able to give it to you. If they also make any claims of high in fibre or low in calories, they should be able to substantiate that as well. That is legislated.
Do you think that South African marketers of food products and manufacturers, because we know a lot of food's also imported, do you think they're taking this seriously, really seriously? I mean, you know, is there a tidal change around this? I mean, I know 1 or 2 companies are taking it quite seriously and are trying to reduce salt. I mean, I've read, for example, Nestle globally have started to go on this massive reduction of salt across the board. But are we seeing that, or are they still erring to the side of, well, the consumer's not going to like the taste of that, and I'm not going to sell so much of that, so therefore let's just wait and see?
Look, we represent over 12,000 manufacturers in the country, so that's a big majority of the food that we do consume. And our members are all aware of the legislation, and they're all serious about complying to the legislation. It does take time. Some of it, the deadlines are given for 2016 and others 2019, depending on what category you fall into. But they're definitely taking it very seriously, and they are responsible in terms of the food and the health and the food safety that we give forward to the public to eat.
And high blood pressure is a real problem in terms of hypertension and the statistics in South Africa.
Absolutely.
But I mean, let's just go back to that salt thing, because I mean, we all like, I don't know anyone who doesn't like salt, and we seem to have an appetite for salt. So how do we get that appetite? I thought, I know I'm wrong, but I thought, I'm trying to find a reason for this. I thought that it is your body naturally telling you that you need more salt.
No.
And often you hear that, I need that salt. That's why I'm craving salt.
As I've mentioned, Giselle, it isn't one of the natural electrolytes that the body needs to function. Your kidneys, for example, work on a very delicate fluid balance, and they need two very important electrolytes to keep that balance of fluid inside your entire body. That's sodium and potassium. So yes, a part of you needs the sodium, but it is found naturally in certain foods. So whether or not we're taking enough is not the question. The key thing is a lot of us are taking more than we should.
Well, thank you to my guests and to you also at home for watching. Before we go, here's a little interesting fast fact about salt.
Well, join us here next week where we'll be discussing testosterone deficiency and how this can affect men.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking forward to that, City. We've got Dr. Barner joining us again. So stay well, be healthy. I hope you have a wonderful week and you'll be back with us next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.